All right. Let's get fired up here.
Maximum freedom. Read.
Stay on target.
Maximum freedom.
Stay on target.
Maximum freedom. Read Rothbard.
Well, hello and welcome to the Actual Anarchy podcast where we talk about movies from a Rothbardian and anarcho-capitalist perspective. And tonight is one of my favorite movies of all time. It's a spoiler already for our fine audience here. This is episode 179 of the show. We're, of course, talking about Napoleon Dynamite on the show tonight. And we're going to be joined by a man with great skills, both staff skills, computer hacking skills, and entrepreneurship skills. And I will introduce him in just a moment when we get into the last night's portion of the show. But before we get into that, I want to make sure that we don't forget to put in the crystals and we check in with my manservant, Robert, over here, who is working real hard, still operating his restaurant during these quarantine days. How you doing, Robert?
Oh, hey, Daniel. How are you? I'm doing fine. Thank you very much for having me on the show. It's always a pleasure.
Well, you know, it wouldn't be a show without you. I mean, you've been on most of them, 99.44%. I'd say you got a pretty good run going. And same with keeping your business running. You said last week that it was kind of rebounding a bit. Are you starting to see even a greater increase in foot traffic or visitations and revenues?
Yeah, revenues are almost back up to where they were pre-COVID, which is very encouraging. Absolutely. The venue, a lot of venues are still shut down, but where we can get in, the customers are there. We just got to bring the product to them, which is really nice. And they really appreciate that we're there. So I think this thing's got legs. We can make it work.
All right, that's awesome. Now, you said that some of the venues aren't open. So does that mean you're working fewer open days per week? Or have you found alternatives that have allowed you to still maintain the same amount of openness you had prior to the shit situation that's befallen everyone here?
No, man, I am barely employed. We're working 2 days a week, which means that I've got 5 days off. But I mean, it's not necessarily all time off. We do need to push the business. Absolutely. We've got to find that other spot. We've got options. Quite a distance away, there's an opportunity to really, if we can make it work, there's an opportunity to really do well. It would involve setting up an entirely separate crew, well, multiple crews to run a single location. But it would be, man, if we could get it to work, that would be really, really exciting. Yeah,
all right,
things are going good, man. How about you? Are you still employed? What's going on? You're still like a caveman guy.
Yeah, I'm in my illustrious cave now. I've actually
I don't hear any peeping.
Yeah, the peeps are gone. The peeps are out in their new coop, and I'm still dealing with the aftermath of the chicken dust on everything. So I spent some time over the weekend and then a little bit earlier before the show, which is why I was late, trying to clean up just a touch because there's chicken dust on everything. But they're on the coop, and we got another coop, and we're going to be repurposing part of the yard and getting them all set up. And I have a question in the when we reconvene back in the Actual Anarchy portion of the show that I'm going to pose to you that's going to be about the chickens. And it's not whether they have large talons or not. We will answer that during the main portion of the show, which we will get into right after this.
Oh, sizzle.
Hey everyone, it's Daniel Elwood and Robert Paul Johnson, and we are the Last Nighters, and we can be found on the Launchpad Media, where they're always launching new ideas in your direction. Check it out at thelaunchpadmedia.com. You can also check out the show notes and more for this episode, which we're going to be doing on Napoleon Dynamite. And we're going to bruise our neck meat on this one, maybe rip our moles off. This is episode 122 of the show. Show notes and more, lastnighter.com/122. And we are going to have a special guest. He's got skills, like I was saying, in our pre-show bonus content available for our Patreon supporters at lastnighter.com/Patreon. You can see this sausage getting made as we do it. You can get pre-show, post-show. Post-show is called Kathleen Turner Overdrive, which is a little bit more laid back. We get a little bit looser and run our mouths a bit longer. But our guest, he's got entrepreneurship skills. It's Miguel Duque of Amagi Entrepreneurs, and he will help us answer the question of if all the chickens have large talons in this flippin' sweet episode where we don't forget to put in the crystals. Welcome back to the show. Miguel, it's a pleasure to have you back on.
Well, hello. Thank you. Great to be here.
Yeah, now remind me, because I am a terrible guest, host, whatever I am. You were on about 6 months ago talking about The Social Network, right?
Yes.
Okay, and that was a fun discussion. That was the Aaron Sorkin episode, and it's Aaron Sorkin, right? It's the witty dialogue where it's like unrealistically quippy and like
Yes.
really good.
West Wing guy, yeah.
Yeah, West Wing guy. Yeah. So you were on for that. Since that time, we've seen more and more things happening in the world, obviously, and Facebook and YouTube and other such social media platforms kind of taking editorial liberties with what is and what is not permitted on their platforms. And it feels as if we are getting closer and closer to that edge of not being publishable, and just any ideas out there that challenge the status quo and the narrative that's being told in the MSM and government sphere isn't going to be permitted all that much longer. We saw YouTube CEO came out, and here I am, I'm on YouTube talking about him, saying that if you disagree with the WHO, that's against our policy guidelines and you're going to get your account banned or whatever. So that's just really interesting stuff. And I thought that kind of related to your episode or your recent appearance with us on The Social Network. So anyway, welcome back to the show. People can find you on our show notes page, of course, lastnighters.com/122. They'll find the previous appearance. And then tell us what brought Napoleon up. I know you mentioned it in the pre-show, but tell our audience why this movie was picked out, and then we'll get into the Google description and kick this off.
Well, yeah, the last episode on Social Network was fun. It was one that I proposed since I'm in business. I'm a business coach. Kind of thought, well, what are some cool movies about entrepreneurship? And that one came to mind, in addition to the really great discussion on all kinds of libertarian related stuff, like you just said, censorship and, you name it. And this one, nothing to do with entrepreneurship or really anything that I do necessarily. It's just kind of a movie that, been one of my favorite movies for a while. And I was just spitballing with you, Daniel, on different movies that I thought would be fun to chat about. And this was one that came up. I don't know. It was just random. It was just one that stuck, I think. So really no motivation other than to probably have an opportunity for you, especially, to just rattle off all kinds of different Napoleon Dynamite quotes and for us to have a fun time thinking about how it pertains to libertarian theory, to the ethics of self-ownership, and we'll see what we get out of it.
All right, well said. And I'll just add that this is our Cinco de Mayo episode because there's a tangential relationship to Mexico, with one of the characters, Pedro, being from Juarez, and also the filmmakers, their second film was Nacho Libre, which we did a couple of years ago for Easter, I want to say, because the one of the guys had diarrhea since Easter's, so that was the very loose connection with Easter that I had for that. Or did we do Cinco de Mayo, Robert?
Crazy. I think it was a Cinco de Mayo episode. But
yeah, right. It's Cinco de Mayo plus. There's also the fact that we're now in an election year that's in full swing, and we've got some electoral politics in this movie.
Yeah, a little
Indeed.
bit. Yeah. They're probably
And
a
there's
little bit more
I don't know
polished than real life here.
okay, I'm going to talk now. All right, so I don't know if you guys heard the recent Tom Woods episode on the homeschooling is wrong and needs to be banned by the what was it, the Arizona lady? I forget.
Harvard?
Was she in
There's a
Harvard?
Harvard thing. I think
There's
so, yeah.
Okay. But anyway, she talks about why, homeschooling is bad because they don't get to take part in student government. And so there's a link right there for our movie. The one
All right.
student government and all the fantastic things that student government people do.
Well, I just have one more thing to add related to Tom Woods. The episode after that was about libertarian response to the lockdowns and protests with, I think her name's Angela McArdle. And at the end of that, Tom promotes a website from a listener who reviews movies. And Tom says, it sure is nice that there's a movie review thing out here that isn't from a libertarian angle that's like ramming it down your throat. So you might be throwing some shade at us. I don't know. Or maybe we're just that irrelevant. He doesn't even think about us at all. But I thought it was kind of fun. It was brought up to me today, and I was like, "Oh, hey, thanks for the subtle neg." But that'll just inspire us to do better, I think. So anyway, speaking of doing better, let's get into this Google description, shall we? So Napoleon Dynamite came out in 2004. It's a comedy / indie film, 1 hour, 36 minutes, 6.9 on the IMDb. 71% Rotten Tomatoes and 4.4 out of 5 on Vudu, and 90% of Google users liked it. The description is, in a small town, Preston, Idaho, awkward teen Napoleon Dynamite, played by Jon Heder, has trouble fitting in. After his grandmother's injured in an accident, his life is made even worse when his strangely nostalgic uncle, Rico, Jon Gries, shows up to keep an eye on him. With no safe haven at home or at school, Napoleon befriends the new kid, Pedro, played by Efren Ramirez, a morose Hispanic boy who speaks little English. Together, the two launch a campaign to run for class president. It says release date June 11, 2004. Director is Jared Hess, and his wife was a co-writer. Budget of $400,000 against a box office of $46.1 million. And gosh, Robert, what's your take on the Go description here?
Well, you know how I feel about comedies. And they seem to be these vehicles, especially when we did your Adam Sandler movie, where all we did was talk about our favorite quotes from the film because the movie itself was so atrocious. This movie, I don't know what sort of alchemy the writers and the director and the cast came up with to produce a film that is almost entirely made of quotes that are meant to be repeated forever and ever. And they don't get old for me. Maybe it's because the quality of the film is so good, or just the idiosyncrasy of the film is so unique. But the film has a very interesting voice, and it's not like other comedies. It's characters that are funny without trying to be funny, and character-based humor, and that's always the best. It's always the longest lasting, because you could take this movie and show it to an audience in 50 years, and it's not like they're talking about, Trump being an orange man bad or anything like that. It's character-based humor. It's all in this world. You believe this world when you watch the film. And that's why it's so good, and it's gonna last. I watched it, recently in the past day or two, and it was as charming. I don't know if it's still as funny, because it's not as funny as the first time you watch it, but it's as charming as ever. It doesn't lose that je ne sais quoi over time. Yeah, and you can quote every single thing in the movie, Daniel. I know.
All right. Well, thank you for bringing my chapstick, Robert. Yeah. This is kind of interesting, because when I was watching Kick-Ass, the movie that we did last week, I was thinking about how that was on the back end of this raunch-com kind of wave of filmmaking, and that maybe it was a little bit too late, and so it didn't really work for me. This one, which was just a few years prior to it, it's that irreverent style still, but for something about it just makes it actually work for me, where Kick-Ass, it fell flat. So there's a kind of a big contrast for me between the two movies, because I would think that they're trying to go for the same kind of audience. and one hit me square in the feels, and the other one was kind of a miss for me, as you recall from my giving it a 3.5 last week on Kick-Ass.
Yeah. Well, this is a movie that feels very honest to itself. It doesn't try, and I don't think it's trying to impress or gross out or push any boundaries. I think it's just trying to present to you this weird little world with these weird little characters. And if you like it, great. If you don't, then it's not your cup of tea. But for me and a lot of people I know, I've never heard anybody say anything bad about Napoleon Dynamite. And in fact, I mentioned we were doing this episode at work the other day, and everybody was like, "Oh man," and they just started quoting it. I think everybody's just got all kinds of great vibes and feels about this movie.
Yeah, it's still got.
And my coworker wanted to get T-shirts, and still wear those. Like 16 years later, still cool to wear.
All right, yeah, it's got that nostalgia, and it's working really well. So, Miguel, let's go to you for your take on the description and anything else that's come up based on our nonsense we've talked about so far.
I mean, the description, it's funny to hear a synopsis or a description of the plot line of this movie. It comes across as almost matter of fact when the movie itself, you watch the movie and you're not given a sense of a unifying plot line necessarily. When the Pedro running for class president, that doesn't even come up until at least halfway into the film, and even then, I mean, there's other things going on. There's Uncle Rico and Kip with all these get-rich-quick schemes. There's Napoleon Dynamite and his love triangle thing with what's her name? Why am I blanking on her name?
Whole Milk Girl.
It's not Tina.
Tina, of course. No, not Tina. So there's just to read a description of this film, like, you'd probably read a description of the film and have a particular, if you never saw it before, you'd read the synopsis and say, oh, okay, this film's about, maybe it's like a coming of age tale, or, kid in school and he's helping his friend but then you watch it and you're like, it's just, it has like this Waiting for Godot type of vibe where you're like, what is this about? I mean, it draws so many questions. We could probably spend years drawing conclusions about existentialism and all kinds of abstract concepts from this film. I promised when I was chatting with you, Daniel, mostly facetiously, I was promising that I would come prepared with very well thought out analysis on Rothbardian, voluntarist philosophy, on things like that. Yeah, that's just not the case.
Wait. So you're not going to fulfill your campaign promise? All my dreams are not going to come true?
I'm sure that we could. I'm sure that we'll get into all kinds of ridiculous commentary. Yet the fact is that this is, I don't know that this film like means anything, if that makes any sense.
Yeah, I don't think it does either.
A lot of films have there's a moral to the story. I don't know that Napoleon Dynamite has that. It's not trying to be that.
All right, I'm going to blow your guys' minds.
Daniel's got the inside. Okay,
I've got a whole theory. I got an all-encompassing theory of everything related to Napoleon Dynamite. But before we get into that,
nice teasing.
I just want to mention that you mentioned like the Adam Sandler movies, and it was just like a bunch of guys getting together with their friends and making a movie. That's literally kind of what happened with this. This was Jared Hess dropped out of BYU to start making this film. This is a film that's based on a short film that he did while still in school. He knew Jon Heder. He was a friend of his. Jon got paid $1,000 to star in this movie. And then he went back and renegotiated to get like a portion of the profits, which is, probably good, but he did agree for $1,000. So, but I see a film about the infantilization of the American male. I see Kip, who's a 32-year-old living in his grandma's house, man baby, who's using up all of her dial-up internets, paying by the minute, charging up grandma's, phone bill to chat up hot babes in Detroit. I see a socially awkward Napoleon who, in his quest to impress and try to fit in as best as possible, he lies so extravagantly to seem cooler than he is. But he's also very emotionally responding to people. He's very quick to be like, gosh, or flip, or, fucking idiot, or freaking idiot, things like that. Like, he doesn't have a maturity about him. So I kind of have this idea that what we're presented with is the 90s to mid 2000s American male during his coming of age. And that is the arc of the story, is that you've got all of the main characters, and we had a discussion of who were main characters and who were minor characters in the pre-show, available for Patreon supporters, where Robert has claimed that Uncle Rico,
Correctly.
Kip, and Napoleon are the main characters, and then Pedro and Tina, or whoever side ponytail. Why can't we remember her name?
1%.
Are lesser characters or background characters, but they all have an arc, and they all come at it from this sort of infantile way of living, in which they're far less mature than they should be given their age as presented in the movie. Uncle Rico wants to go back. He even buys a time machine to attempt to do this, so he can go back and change events of him being a star athlete and being put into the game to win state, and then get into the NFL and be chilling in a hot tub with his soulmate. But that's his motivation in this, is to win back a soulmate, to try to make up for lost time. Kip is just trying to also find a soulmate, but he doesn't do anything. Like, all he does is chat with babes. He doesn't have any source of income. And then when Uncle Rico comes up with an idea for them to go out and make money by selling a product to people, he's very quick to give up and not put in the work. So it's like they want these things, but they just want them without being willing to put in the effort. And so am I starting to form just the outline of maybe an existential crisis that each of these characters is dealing with, and maybe there is some meaning behind what we see in this film, and it's not just ridiculous characters with funny lines that are all just seemingly stringed together into a 90-minute film.
Well, in order to finalize your thesis, Daniel, don't you need to provide some kind of evidence for there being growth in those areas? I don't
Certainly.
think that is there growth that's had. I mean, I see your point in that Napoleon comes from a broken home. He's living with his grandmother, and he has no positive male role model. Who knows what happens to his father, or Kip's father,
Or even the mother.
or even their mother. Who knows what happened to them? So yeah, doesn't have that example to live from. But to go with your thesis, what is the completion of that arc? Do they grow at the end?
Yeah, they all do.
Do they grow up from man babies into men?
To a degree. Napoleon finds himself and gets acceptance for being the eccentric that he is when he performs the dance for the school and gets a standing ovation. Uncle Rico, his girlfriend comes back to him. Not sure why, but that's what he's searching for the whole time.
Yes, the most unrealistic scene in the movie, by the way.
Yeah. Kip finds love with LaFonda, and he finds an identity. She helps him with his gangster chic new identity, which, he didn't really have one before. So he does find at least some kind of something to hold on to. He does change.
You're left to wonder if he ever gets a job. Like, what does he do? Maybe he becomes internet famous. I don't know. Maybe he becomes a rapper.
It's possible. And maybe he's Eminem. I don't know. It's possible. But also, just speaking of the quirkiness of the film, in Napoleon Dynamite and in Nacho Libre, they have the food credits opening scene. And that was started because the Kip character came up with this idea of how to represent the different characters in food in the credits. Because when they first created the film and screened it for a few people, we were just kind of dumped into the high school or whatever the opening scene is. And people were like, well, we have no idea what the frame of reference is. When is this? Why is this? What's going on? And so they have that opening scene with Napoleon's ID, his high school ID, saying what the year is and kind of introducing the characters. And then everything that their names are written in is something that character eats back later in the film. And oh, by the way, my wife and I, we have Tater Tot Tuesday. Today's Tuesday. This show is going to come out on Sunday or Monday. But I was supposed to have Tater Tots today, not only because it's Tater Tot Tuesday, but because we're doing Napoleon Dynamite. And wife fail, no Tater Tots. So sometime before then, I'm calling you out, wife. Don't you forget ever again. But we're going to have Tater Tots sometime later this week. But anyway, I just thought I'd throw that in there. That was Aaron Rule's idea. And one last thing on that. Apparently, the Fox Searchlight bought the rights to the film for distribution. And one of their business execs didn't like the hands that were doing it. It's Jon Heder's hands, and he had like a hangnail or something. So she had a hand model, George Costanza hand model, fly in, and reshoot some of the scenes. And then another guy on the crew also did a few other scenes. So what we see in final film is kind of a amalgamation of 3 different people doing it to create the opening scene. Anyway, I think it's really creative and it looks really cool. And they did the same thing for Nacho Libre. Anyway, I'm going to let you talk now. I've been just running my mouth for a while. Miguel, let's get your take. Robert already gave me a little bit of feedback on my overall nascent thesis here, but what's your take on all that?
Well, no, I don't blame you for just ranting there, because I too read the Wikipedia page and I found all those interesting points of trivia. To your theory, I do see something there. And that's one of the cool things about the film is it doesn't beat you over the head with this sort of, lesson or typical story having a lesson that comes with it. I mean, those things that you pointed out are so subtle that to argue that they exist, you could very easily be refuted. Because I don't know, looking at the end of the film, looking at the end of the movie, I don't know what Napoleon's real character growth is. Like, he makes amends with Deb is her name, by the way.
Good man.
He makes amends with Deb. However, he didn't ever really do anything wrong. It wasn't his fault that he and Deb had a falling out. It was that Uncle Rico lied to her, and Napoleon had no freaking clue why Deb was mad at him. Yet at the end, he very much he maybe forgives her, or she forgives him, and they play tetherball, and he wins. And I don't know what else. Though there is maybe, if anything, the character development is that he makes that quote unquote ultimate sacrifice for Pedro when they had no clue that they were going to have to do a skit. And coincidentally, or by fate rather, Napoleon had been practicing that cute. What's the dance guy's name? Something Quan?
DJ Quan, I think.
Yeah. And makes the ultimate sacrifice and goes out there impromptu and does his elaborate dance. So maybe that's some character development. I mean, I guess if you look at what some of that character development is that earlier in the film, again, it's very, very subtle because so much is going on that you don't even notice that there's really a plot line. There's just these random things happening. Yet earlier in the film, he and Kip go to Rex Kwon Do, the dojo, and Rex, at the very end of that scene, says something to the effect of, last thing, never fly solo. Always got to have somebody watching your back. And it appears that if you look into it, Napoleon hears that and he actually takes it to heart, where he's never before seemingly has never made an effort to make friends. And maybe Rex, maybe he took that lesson from Rex and said, okay, maybe I gotta find a friend so that I'm not flying solo. And sure enough, the next day he's at school and he sees this new kid in the hallway and goes up and talks to him and shows him the ropes and shows him around school. And sure enough, they're fast friends. Pedro becomes Napoleon's sidekick, so that he's not flying solo anymore. And he realizes that he's gotta look out for his buddy. And then sure enough, at the end, he really comes through for his friend. So maybe that's, to quote another movie, it's one thing he learns is not to be a one-man wolf pack anymore, that he wants to bring others into his wolf pack. He brings Pedro into his wolf pack. He brings Deb into his wolf pack, I think. Even if there's not like a true romantic relationship there, even if it's just platonic, I think that Napoleon comes to see Deb as one of his wolf pack members. And maybe he has a thing for her too. Who knows?
Yeah, I'll agree. And that's Blades of Glory that you're talking about, which is another Jon Heder movie. I think he's been in Benchwarmers after this, and then Blades of Glory, and then I don't know what else. I think he kind of fell off my radar.
I was really thinking of The Hangover.
Oh, okay. Well, in Blades of Glory, Will Ferrell has a lone wolf on his shoulder, and he gets a picture of Jon Heder tattooed next to the wolf because he says the lone wolf is no longer alone or something like that. It's hilarious. Wow. And he says, "Welcome to the pack."
Now the conspiracy theory is really coming together.
Yeah, it's all coming together. And then speaking of Rex, they go to Rex because Kip wants to become more like a man. He wants to mature. And he goes there and he spars with Rex and does this weak sweep kick and gets tapped in the head. And then, he does the break the wrist and walk away. And he finds that it's difficult and that it's going to cost like $300. So that's another thing where he wants something and he goes and investigates it just a little bit, dips his toe in the water. And he's like, oh, too rich for my blood, or too much effort, too much work, not willing to put in the work. So that's another thing that Kip does later on when he's selling the Tupperware. So he's kind of got that toe in the water, not really willing to commit or put in the work to actually get the results that he claims that he wants. So I think that just supports my my idea a little bit more. So let's go to you, Robert. What's on what Miguel was saying?
Well, you definitely have evidence that Kip is a man baby and Uncle Rico hasn't grown up and is living in the past, but I still don't see Napoleon. I mean, he's still a young man. He's still in high school. And I see him getting friends, which he didn't have in the past, but we don't really see him failing for lack of friends. So I don't really know if that's the growth. I'm really struggling to see what his failures were early in the movie were that, then he has this arc. He needs to fail in the beginning in order to have an arc at the end.
Well, I'll give it to you. He's so trying to impress people that he comes up with these crazy lies about hunting wolverines and shooting them with a 12 gauge. And he thinks that he needs to have these skills and to impress people to get people to like him. And so he goes over the top in doing that, and he fails at it. People are bullying him. They're mean to him. They smash his tots. They shove him into his locker. He gets assaulted multiple times in this movie, and he's derided as this, totally awkward nerd. And he doesn't find any acceptance until he completes his arc at the end, where he lets go and dances for his friend to save his friend in that sacrifice that Miguel was talking about. And he finds acceptance from all of those people for being himself. Now, one last thing about the dancing. You might be a little bit too old for this, Robert, but there was a guy who was a few years younger than me in high school. And so he might not have been in high school at the same time as you, but he Well, you actually probably do know who he is because I think your dad knew him. He would go to the dances and he would dance like a wild man, like Napoleon in this movie. But during the day, he was like this socially awkward, kind of dorky guy that no one really talked to all that much. And then at the dances, he was this flamboyant, very emotive dancer. And it really stood out. I don't want to drop his name, but you might know who I'm talking about. But
Can
he
we
was
at least get his name in the chat, please?
all right in the private chat.
Private
I'm
chat.
gonna give this to Robert here.
Yes,
I'll
please.
give him some of the vid here. All right. Hopefully, no one else can see that. I guess.
Yeah, I think I've heard that name, but I couldn't put a face to that for sure.
Okay. Well, he was kind of like Napoleon. And in anyway, that's my point is that Napoleon was so hard up for finding acceptance in his school that he would lie like crazy in order to try to get acceptance, and he would fail every time until the end when he was just being himself. And for whatever reason, like Miguel, you were saying, he just randomly bought this tape to learn how to dance. But that's something he did for himself or for the movie. But he ended up doing the dance because he wanted to dance and because Pedro needed a skit and the people loved it. So people accepted Napoleon for who he was. And that was what his goal was throughout the movie.
I guess you could see his early lies as wanting acceptance. I can be on board with that a little bit. I took it mostly as just him being strange and weird, but I guess looking at it from this perspective, I can see your point. What do you got, Miguel?
I was just going to say, I'm thinking back also to the first scene of the movie. So Napoleon's outside of his house. The school bus starts to roll up. You see him just sigh with like this deep angst. Of course, you know, a vehicle is coming to take him to his child day prison of public school. And he gets on the school bus. He goes to the back of the bus where that's where the real outcasts go, right? He goes to the back of the bus. And
yeah, in my day, it was the cool kids who sat in the back, by the way.
In this case, we can surmise that that's not the case in this school. If Napoleon and that one other rando kid are in the back of the bus, those are not the cool kids, okay? Napoleon goes straight to the back of the bus, and probably one of the few people in the world that even gives him the time of day, innocently and friendly, you know, with a friendly tone, asks him, you know, what are you going to do tonight, Napoleon? And he freaking snaps at the kid. Whatever I feel like I want to do. Gosh. Like, and that was, if anything, that was him declaring his self-ownership, you know, to tie it back to Rothbardian or voluntarist ethics. Yet he like snaps at this kid randomly. And then he busts out a little action figure. And in this weird sadistic kind of act, he ties a string to it and throws it out the window. And he's, you know, apparently gets some pleasure out of inflicting damage to this figurine.
You know, I think he was trying to get battle damage on it for his for playing with it.
That was not my interpretation. My interpretation was that Napoleon is full of angst. He lives in this very oppressive world. No friends. And he's got to take his anger out on this little action figure. And basically, what would be, if it were a real person, it would be a gruesome act of torture that people used to do to each other, like tie somebody up to a horse and then have them run and drag them across the road. So you can look at earlier in the film, and he hangs around this young man. And I think that's the same person who he asked for his tots, right? Is that kid who was in the back of the bus with him. Though I don't know that I don't know that Napoleon sees that kid as his friend. He's just
I don't remember a kid asking Napoleon for his tots, except for the asshole boyfriend guy.
Yeah, who like shoved the tots, smashed him in his pocket.
Napoleon asked the kid for his tots.
I thought you asked Pedro.
I missed that one.
No, you're right. It was Pedro.
Either way, I don't want to detract from your point, though. Is that
Still a good point?
Napoleon's got a sadistic streak. I also think Kip does as well, and I noticed that when Napoleon was using Uncle Rico's time machine from Florida, and he forgot to put in the crystals, and then he put it in, and he gets shocked. He's like, "Zzz." Kip, in seeing this, gets this like weird sadistic smile, like he's enjoying seeing his brother in pain. And this is kind of fucked up, but my daughter did that the other day, where one of them got hurt and the other one like smiled about it and was like happy about it. I'm like, oh, that's fucked up. So gotta nip that in the bud.
Yeah, it's true. Obviously, Kip knew fully well that the thing was a ripoff, didn't work, and that he just saw Rico do the same thing to himself, and he was completely knowingly letting Napoleon get into the same situation because he was gonna.
I didn't think that was. I viewed it as Kip thought that it really did work, and then it's revealed right after the end of that scene that Uncle Rico had already done it because he's like hunched over. But
yes,
what you're saying makes sense. That Kip was probably there for Uncle Rico's attempt, so he knew he knew that Napoleon would fall into this trap of, oh, of course it works. Yeah. Oh, yeah. Oh, you're not supposed to touch it. You know, like that forbidden fruit thing where you tell them they can't have it, and then that makes them want it more. So that made Napoleon want to actually do it. All right. Yeah. See, my daughter lays traps too. She's like, she'll do things to make the other one incidentally make contact or whatever, and then she'll use that as an excuse to retaliate. It's totally calculated, and it's brilliant, but also pretty evil. So,
all right. Well, Miguel brings up the second most libertarian scene in the film, where Napoleon declares that he's going to do whatever he wants to do, thereby establishing his self-ownership. But let's talk about the number one most libertarian scene in the film, whereupon Napoleon, upset with his Uncle Rico for ruining his life, demands that he leave his property.
Yes.
And Uncle Rico says, "Make me, Napoleon. I'm here at request of your grandmother." I'm not doing this verbatim. I don't know the exact lines.
Well,
but Napoleon,
he says, "Get the heck off my property." And Uncle Rico's response is, "It's a free country."
It's a free country. That's right.
Not anymore.
But Napoleon says very explicitly, "Get off my property," right?
Which is false. I mean, he's probably homesteaded it more than Uncle Rico has, but it's actually his grandmother's house, right?
Yes, and I think it could be argued that Napoleon has essentially like tenants' rights. He's effectively like a tenant of this property, and because it's his residence, he's in possession of the property. Whereas Uncle Rico is not. Uncle Rico is a visitor.
True, but he was a guest, an invited guest, right?
He is an invited guest. However, really, it's Napoleon's permanent residence. And Uncle Rico, having been invited to the home by the grandmother, as the adult, doesn't give him
to care for Napoleon, the minor.
Uncle Rico just a blank check to do whatever he wants on this property.
Correct, but can a minor kick an invited adult off of the grandmother's property, essentially?
I mean, if we want to go
making a claim. He's making a private property claim. I appreciate that.
I would say 100%.
Really?
I would say under certain circumstances. In this case, this minor is...
He's definitely making the claim that he has the right to kick off Uncle Rico. He's not like a 7-year-old saying, "Get out of here. I don't want you around here."
What another thing he said was, "You're just hanging around eating all of our steak and ruining my life."
Ruining everybody's lives.
God.
So I would
out of
say
here.
that that is potentially valid grounds for Napoleon to make an argument for ejecting Uncle Rico from the property.
Okay, so let's say that scene gets carried out to its completion and Napoleon calls the police. I want to get a vote between the three of us here as to what happens in that scene. Do the police escort Uncle Rico off, or do they go, no, Napoleon, you're a kid and he's been invited here and you just need to settle down? Daniel, what do you think?
First, they shoot Uncle Rico's dog. I know he didn't have to.
And then they shoot Tina because she's a fat
Yeah.
lard.
And then they tase Uncle Rico and haul him away for not wearing a mask and maintaining social distancing.
What the cops, let's say that theoretical scenario plays out and the cops come, what the cops do is a separate question from who has a claim on the property and so on and so forth. The cops, yeah, we could say that they'd most likely side with Uncle Rico, though I would say that's not guaranteed to be the right answer, in my opinion. I mean, I think Napoleon has a fair claim.
Yeah, well, maybe they defer to Kip, who is the other adult in the house and has more of a claim to residence and maturity, or at least a maturity recognized in legal sense of being a 32-year-old knee-high sock wearing computer nerd.
Or they try and contact the grandmother, most likely.
The broker coccyx.
Well, we know Kip would side with Uncle Rico because Uncle Rico's helping him score cash and whatnot. But
don't be jealous. He's been talking to hot babes all day.
It's fair to say that Uncle Rico is the type who sees this as an opportunity to take advantage of unlimited stake. Like, he's showing up not just to look after Napoleon and Kip out of the goodness of his heart. You know, he sees it as an opportunity to wrangle Kip into this get rich quick scheme of his.
Well, and we definitely see you're correct about that, because later on in the movie, when he's kicked out, he's living in a van in a field.
Here's how, yeah, exactly. He's got like a clothesline.
He's got nothing.
Here's how little, like when the government takes your tax money and then they completely blow it on useless crap and waste.
Like a time machine from Florida.
That is exactly how Rico, what his attitude is towards the steak. He literally takes the steak off of Kip's plate and throws it at Napoleon's face. And so there you have it. I mean, he definitely he's taken advantage of the steak situation, and he is very much ruining people's lives through what amounts to, in some ways, fraud, libel. We could go into that, where he is going around telling lies. I mean, he's selling snake oil, and for that matter, he's ruining the reputation of Napoleon by telling people that he wets the bed and that he thought it would be a good idea for Deb to take these breast enhancement supplements. So he's like going around, in a way, I don't know if it'd be libel or slander per se, though it's definitely, he's lying. I mean, he's violating, I would say that that amounts to some type of NAP violation.
Yeah, and you're lying about the guy.
Napoleon's also going around lying all the time. Granted, it's not about other people per se. It's about his own skills and exploits to try to impress.
Indeed.
I feel like Uncle Rico was just trying to find an angle in talking with people to present what he's offering, what he's selling. So they're almost like white lies in a way.
But they really boomerang back and affect Napoleon's life.
Yeah, but imagine you're Uncle Rico. You're not like intending to ruin Napoleon.
Oh yeah, I don't think Rico's malicious and like hates Napoleon and wants to ruin his life. I don't think he's out to do that. It's just a consequence of his selling technique.
Right. And the steak thing, Lyle came by to get more steak, and that actually happened. I think you saw that too in the notes, Miguel, where that was a scene from Jared's childhood that the school bus goes by as a cow gets shot.
That I didn't see.
Yeah, so that's a fun scene because you see the bus coming up as the guy's like getting the gun ready, and then bus goes by, shot rings out, kids scream. It's a nice transition. This film is shot very well. I don't know if you guys noticed that all of the framing is really good. Even in the bowling alley, you know how they have the alternating pattern colored seats? Just the angle that they were shooting that from, the row that Uncle Rico was in and the row behind him, lined up in such a way to make it perfectly make a square of the alternating pattern. And I noticed this throughout the film. Whenever they were showing like a static shot, they were framing it in such a way to have some visual interest, something quirky going on in the background.
Something quirky in this film? I don't believe it.
It 100% goes to show what you can achieve on a shoestring budget, just with the fundamentals of good film, good photography, good editing, just the way it's edited so that the timing is right. You know, the timing is right of the little silent, quirky moments. You know, the timing can just ruin that if it's not edited properly. So there's these good little awkward pauses. There's just definitely good casting, good other really great elements of the film. So yeah, I think it's the success of the film speaks for itself in that sense of how successful it's been, how it was made on a shoestring budget. You pointed out how Jon Heder was originally only paid $1,000. That part just baffles me. That they had. I mean, Jon Heder. I mean, he's the star, and he was paid $1,000. I wonder what. I think her name is Haley Duff, right? Who played Summer. I wonder what she was paid. She's got to be nominally, or at least at the time, I would think, at least by association to Hilary Duff, would have been nominally more famous. And same with Diedrich Bader. I wonder what he. Some of these actors or actresses must have gotten paid more than Jon Heder himself.
Yeah, well, Diedrich Bader, I think he did all of his shooting in one day.
Oh yeah.
So did he work for scale or something, like just come up for one day? And
I'm sure that makes sense.
He's one of those guys that just adds just a hint of flair. Just, you know, speaking of Office Space, he made a very memorable turn in that. Turn it to Channel 9.
Yeah, Preston exam chicks back on. He's hilarious.
Yeah, so I love Diedrich Bader. And Robert, you had the question earlier, who's your favorite minor character? For me, it's Rex, who has the wisdom of a man as he's choking out a woman in the commercial.
Yeah, thank you. He's the best side character. I'm sorry. Not sorry.
What's that line again? The wisdom of a man and what?
The strength of a puma, or the reflexes of a puma, something like that.
Yes.
But,
the reflexes of a puma and the wisdom of a man.
You think anyone wants a kick to the face where I'm wearing these bad boys?
Very.
I don't think so.
Very.
And then he gets his arm broken. He breaks Uncle Rico's arm. So, you know, it's a good, feel good story.
Thinks I'm a failure because I go home to Starla at night. See, I just quote this thing all day.
I know you can.
But I hate to say it, but we are almost an hour in to our episode here. So are there any final notes or points that you want to make? I'll go to you, Miguel, and then we'll go to Robert.
Well, sheesh. I mean, there's so much we didn't get into. We didn't even get into the electoral politics.
The chickens or the $1 an hour?
There's that. There's interesting points from there. Though that was another thing that I thought might come up was the whole election side of things. I think it'd be safe to say Summer is the establishment candidate. Maybe some similarities could be drawn to Hillary Clinton. She's definitely the presumed front runner, and that Pedro is the underdog. I don't know that
outsider. He's an outsider.
What's that?
The underdog outsider.
Absolutely. Yeah. So I don't know that you could say that he is a libertarian candidate or like a Ron Paul style candidate, though he's the unlikely candidate.
Well, typically a politician has charisma, and he's a wooden block. I mean, at least, Summer can make a speech that at least elicits some response. Pedro just stands up there and monotones into a microphone for 20 seconds and then walks off. He's not a candidate.
There's a movement behind Pedro. That's what it's really all about. He's the people's
candidate. He is the people's candidate, but
I think if you look at it, it's kind of a revolt of the uncool kids against the cool kid who was supposed to win. Like Summer was the one who was supposed to win. She was the popular girl.
And politics is a popularity contest. She should have won. Absolutely.
So she, by all means, was supposed to win. Yet all of the outcasts, the weirdos, the uncool kids rallied behind Pedro, thanks to really to Napoleon putting himself out there like that. I mean,
and Pedro's cousins offering protection from the bullies.
Oh yeah,
they won him a few votes for sure. Although, what was the piñata? Did that really even look like her at all? I mean, what is this? Some sort of religious non-effigy thing, or like abuse? I didn't really.
Well, it was intended to be her.
Was it?
Yeah.
Yes.
It was a political event, and so they're beating up a piñata of the opposing candidate. I mean, it didn't look very much like her.
After he met with the principal, he was like, "Well, they said you're not supposed to make piñatas that look like people, but in Mexico we do it all the time." So yeah, it was supposed to be Summer. I don't think that it was really intended to like incite violence against Summer. I don't think it was a little more harmless than that in nature.
Yeah, I think it's just, hey, we're going to beat this lady in the election rally support sort of thing.
Yeah.
I'm not trying to defend it. It's kind of a strange... I stay out of politics entirely. I think it's all disgusting, so whatever.
Your mom goes to college.
Yes. I can't tell you how many times we used that insult after this movie came out. I've probably used it 50 times.
The thing about that in the movie is that it makes no sense for him to say that at that point.
That's why it's awesome.
And so it stands out so much.
Yes. That's the one time I broke out laughing when I was watching this movie yesterday, is when he said that line. That was just, even though I knew it was coming and I've heard it before many, many times and said it before many, many times, it still hit me really hard. It was awesome.
It really came out of nowhere. We're not even shown at the time. Up until that point, we're not even shown that Kip is listening to this conversation or that he's in any position to chime in on anything. And yet he interjects with that. And and then it switches to him and you see his smug little face. Like he's so happy with himself. Got him.
Kip is such a fabulous character.
Yeah, maybe
I'm glad he finds happiness at the end.
He's like a paleo 4chan guy, who's like funny with quips and memes.
He's a troll. He is 100% a 4chan troll.
Yeah.
If 4chan existed in that world at the time, that's what he would have been spending all that time on dial-up doings, trolling people in 4chan.
Like 3 or 4 hours sometimes in the chat room.
You pay for that by the minute?
Your grandma pays for that. One last thing about Napoleon is not only is he socially awkward, but he has no social graces either. Like when he talks to Deb the first time, I see you're drinking 1%. Is that because you think you're fat? So he doesn't have the tools, the skills to be social with people. And so that's why.
And I think everybody can identify with that. I don't know if anybody here has ever felt awkward talking to somebody in an awkward social situation, but I know I have.
Yeah, I feel awkward every time we do a show, man. all the time.
Part of the charm.
So, Robert, do you have any final notes before we move into final summary review and a scoring round?
Well,
Dan,
I mean,
electric-
we could talked about the large talons and Napoleon getting a job, and I don't know if his wagers negotiated beforehand, but he was certainly upset about it afterwards, which makes him a very strange, terrible entrepreneur. But it's one of those mistakes you make when you're a kid. But yeah, I remember working for harvesting operation outfit when I was younger than Napoleon was in this film. Yeah, we didn't make very much. We didn't quite make $1 an hour. We made a little bit more than that, but I think it was like $3.75 an hour. Picking
the old
spinach.
spinach fields, right? Yeah.
Yeah, that's back-breaking labor in the hot sun for $3.75 an hour. It would kill me today to try and do that now.
Yeah, that lion-ass farmer, he's completely a sweatshop owner. I mean, he didn't even attempt to, when you look back, he's like, can't find my checkbook. Hope you don't mind if I pay you in cash. Like, he didn't even try. He knows damn well he doesn't have a checkbook on him anywhere. He was not at any point intending to pay these young men a fair wage by check. He was going to give them coins that they wouldn't even count and give them like a weird ass, raw egg drink as part of his compensation. Like, yeah, he's very much, it's a good point. That was not a fair wage. There was definitely some exploitation.
Wow.
Well, plus those sweet sandwiches. What are you talking
With
about?
the flies on them? I don't know, man. I think that Napoleon just didn't realize what he was signing up for. I don't think there was exploitation per se. I think the farmer was fine. He didn't have his checkbook on him, maybe out of convenience, or maybe just because it was funnier to pay them in change. And then Napoleon counts it later and realizes it's like $1 an hour because he only made $6. But we also do see a glimpse of that tracking shot when they're going through the chicken factory there. I mean, that is like a factory farm style, chicken operation. They're living in very small cages and they're pooping down this chute right in the middle, and then they're laying their eggs to be harvested. And that's kind of how they were living. And his job was to help move, 8,000 chickens into new cages. For whatever reason, they would do that. But it gives me, I don't know, some more satisfaction in getting chickens myself, because now I'm not going to be buying eggs that are coming from a place like that. But that's like an aesthetic thing, like I think that they're animals and they're for a purpose of being utilized. And I don't agree with torturing animals or having them live in terrible conditions. So I won't support that monetarily, but I don't think it's a crime per se. He's not going out his way to like sadistically harm them. It's just the most efficient way to get as many low quality eggs as possible.
Well, when you say that, it reminds me that my parents actually, back in like the early 80s, maybe the early 70s, mid 70s, as a way to support the family, there was that chicken farm across the highway, Daniel. I don't know if you know this or not. Across from I-5, there was one of these chicken farms that is very similar to the one in Napoleon Dynamite, except...
Oh, yeah, you see all the houses? They're the long buildings, right?
Yeah, they're long buildings. Yep.
Yeah.
It doesn't exist anymore, or it's still there, but it's not operational. But they worked there doing the same job Napoleon did, just grabbing chickens and grabbing them by the legs and then moving them from cage to cage. But from the way my father describes it, when he dropped one, if you ever dropped one, they would fall into this muck. That it's basically like World War I. If you fall into the mud, you're dead. You can't get out. You don't want to pull the chicken out because it's just gone. The chicken is gone, and that's just all there is to it. So he describes a very a horrific summer doing that. So I don't envy Napoleon or my father for doing that terrible job. But I don't see it as an evil thing, but definitely like, distasteful.
It's almost like how Jon Heder himself got paid $1,000. And then the film like profits like $42 million. He's like, it's like $1 an hour.
Yeah, pretty close to it. Well, Robert, it sure would be nice if you could pull me into final summary and review time.
Oh, would it be nice? Okay, so Napoleon Dynamite, classic comedy from 2004. I think how you're going to rate this is going to be on how well it still hits you 16 years later. And for me, it still hit me just as strong. I don't know if it's just as strong as the first time you saw it, but this is a comedy you can come back to over and over again because the comedy, it's true to its world and to itself. Nothing happens in the film that pulls you out of it. It's all true to the characters. And I would say, like we said throughout the show, you kind of have to find the plot in the film, which is kind of true in a lot of comedies. But I would watch this film over and over again. I wouldn't want to watch it day by day, but I could come back to it every couple of years and still enjoy the heck out of it. It's well acted, except for the boyfriend. The asshole boyfriend is one of the worst actors I've ever seen. It's this weird, forced asshole jock thing, which you think most men could channel, but this guy couldn't do it. Yeah, it's still good. I'm glad Heder went on to do more good things, and the writer-director duo went on to do more good things. You can definitely tell that their careers were launched from this film. I don't know if they've ever topped it, though. Maybe they're going to spend their whole careers trying to top this thing that is just so good. Some sort of lightning in a bottle that was captured
Nacho
for $40,000. Nacho Libre is not as good as this film, Daniel. Don't even compare the two.
I couldn't even finish watching Nacho Libre.
It's just not. It doesn't have the charm. It doesn't have the charm or the humor. I'm sorry, but I'm not sorry. This movie is a strong 8 for me. Highly recommended. If you haven't seen it, check it out.
All right, very good. Thank you for that, Robert. And speaking of Jack Black, the reason Jack Black was in Nacho Libre was because they had been in contact with him about being the Diedrich Bader character. He was going to be Rex in this movie, but then Bader ended up getting the role. So they had Jack be in Nacho Libre. All right, Miguel, let's go to you. So Robert gave it, what did you get, an 8 or an 8.5?
An ocho, senor. ESPN
All right.
ocho.
Robert gave it the ocho. Miguel, your score summary review, please.
Yeah.
And the long sigh first is perfect.
I mean, this film, to me, I think if you look at the film and its legacy, the film itself, I think when I first saw it, when I first saw it, I was 2004, so I was approximately 14 years old. I was like the perfect age I was the target. I would say I was the target viewer of this film. It was popular with people of all ages. Yet I remember that in 7th grade, I think it was when this movie came out, that I was in 7th grade, like we were head over heels about this movie. And I'd never seen a movie like this. And I think a lot of people had never seen a movie like this. And I think that it really ushered in almost like a renaissance, if you will, of this quirky, cringe, awkward comedy style of movies. I mean, not just Nacho Libre. I think a lot of other comedy, film, and TV really it inspired a lot more of this same vein of cringe comedy.
With the indie tinge.
The Office or things like that. Reno 911.
I think I would venture to say that it had at least some influence on things such as The Office. And I mean, then again, I mean, you know, The Office was inspired by the UK, or at least the US version was inspired by the UK version. I don't know that the UK version of The Office was inspired by Napoleon Dynamite. Yet Napoleon Dynamite came in just at the perfect time to ride this wave of this new trend in comedy. And I think that that's significant. I think that the film is a very accomplished film. I think that it will go on to be seen as a film that is fairly timeless, in that I think that people well into the future could probably watch it and enjoy it quite a bit. So I would also, I'm not going to go and overrate it by the same token. All that being said, I'm not going to go and say it's a 10 by any means. I don't think I would even want to give it a 9 necessarily, though I do want to give it a solid somewhere in the 8 range. For some reason, 8.4 is what I'm just, you know, when
I make all
wrote
my
it,
ratings on the spot too. So
I think to Napoleon, what he said about just follow your heart, that's what I always do. So I'm following my heart. I'm giving it an 8.4.
All right. Well, thank you for that. And this is one of my favorite movies, and it still hits me. It's one of those kind of things that, sometimes when you'll hear a song and you'll like the song and you won't really know all of the lyrics, but you'll still like the song. I feel like some movies are like that for me, and that's kind of a terrible admission for a movie critic person like myself, though I was more like that, not paying that much attention to the plot or anything for certain movies way back in the day. And this is one of those movies where the characters were engaging enough and interesting enough, and the quotable lines and the scenes are funny enough to where it's just a succession of those scenes, and that's enough for me to enjoy the movie. So it wasn't until I watched this a couple of nights ago when I finally put together what the actual story arc is, and where my thesis kind of came from was in following what the character arcs were and what their motivations might have been, and their actions or lack of action to try to achieve those, or their willingness to give up despite saying otherwise, to where I actually saw what the arcs really were. And so that's kind of what brought up my ideas all together, kind of coalesced it. But I still find that this movie is very enjoyable. And in fact, I have a newfound appreciation for it because all of the scenes set up the next scene or the next fragment of that person's character arc. And I think if you guys were to watch this again, you'd kind of see that. Like the Rex thing is what brings up the idea of Napoleon needing to have friends. And so then he reaches out and has friends as a result and moves on from there. And Rico, we get a couple of moments where he's trying to achieve something. And then later on that begets something else. So this is actually a really well done film. It's very, very quirky, very quotable. Like I said, the characters are very, very memorable. And for all being like so awkward and weird, they are also very, very unique. Which I think must have been kind of a challenge, to come up with this many unique yet crazily quirky characters. And it still is one of my favorites. It's a go-to. One of my buddies, Joe, I told him that we were doing this movie. I still send him quotes from this and he just laughs. He also really enjoys Big Lebowski. So that's another one that just has great characters and great memories and funny scenes and quotable stuff. So this fits right in there, and I think you guys are right. This is going to stand the test of time. It's hard to date this movie because, it could be any time in the 80s, 90s, or 2000s because Napoleon is so awkward that moon boots, though popular in the 80s, you could envision him wearing in the 90s or the 2000s. So it could fit in any of those periods, and I think it does a very fine job. So I'm going to go with a 9 on this. This is up there for me. And in sharp contrast to Kick-Ass, which I think was attempting for the same audience, and I gave that a very, very low score. But that one just was a miss for me, and this one was a very good film. So, Miguel, thank you. I've been wanting to do this one for quite a while, and I'm glad that we finally got to it. I really thought we'd get more into the economics, and that was before I watched it again and kind of saw this arc that I wanted to bring up, and unfortunately, that dominated the conversation. But I think it was still a good episode. So thank you for indulging me in my fantasies, and my wildest dreams have come true and being able to run my mouth about them for a little while with you guys.
Yes.
My pleasure, Daniel. And thank you, Miguel. Yeah.
All right. Well, Miguel, you've been a great guest. You were also on for Social Network. And then this one, we'll have links to your Amagi entrepreneurs and your previous appearance on our show notes page, lastnighters.com/122. I'm hoping that you can stick around for our Patreon bonus content called Kathleen Turner Overdrive, which will be coming up right after we end up here. And then, Robert, next week, we're going to be doing a Mother's Day inspired episode with the great Rachel Kennerly of Cannabis Heals Me, as we talk about Marky Mark and the Funky Bunch's Instant Family.
Oh, yeah. Yeah, that's right. Yeah, you sent me that link the other day, and it looks like it's got a lot of content. So a couple that get some bunch of kids thrown on them. So some surprise parenthood, all kinds of hijinks and drama. Sounds good.
Yeah, it should have plenty of conversation. And she also has experience in the adoption realm. And so she'll be able to speak to that from personal experience, if you know what I mean. And so I think that'll be a really interesting conversation. Also, just to throw this out there for everyone, we're probably going to be doing a crossover episode with her. So we're going to do Instant Family on our show, and then we're going to make an appearance on her show talking about the marijuana-themed movie The Gentleman with Matthew McConaughey. So it's going to be kind of a twofer coming up in the next couple of weeks here. So keep on the lookout for that. And I guess we'll see you guys all next week after we bruise our neck meat and rip some moles off in Kathleen Turner Overdrive right after these messages. Oh, you know what, Robert? I forgot to mention, how can people support us? Geez, how could I forget that?
Oh, the same way they always can, Daniel. It hasn't changed. You can still go to Trepser and buy all kinds of different merch. It's not just T-shirts. It's stickers. It's printed stuff on things. If you can be as precise as that, I don't know if it's possible, but you can also give us a review on the Apple, the tunes of the apples. You can subscribe to us on the YouTubes. You can give us a like. You can give a thumbs up. You can tell your friends, family, loved ones, talk about this fantastic show that isn't, even though we bill ourselves as this Rothbardian anarcho-capitalist show, I think we're more of just like a movie review show, and we kind of cram into libertarian talk here and there. But I don't know how hardcore libertarian themed we are lately. I think we started out super hardcore, but I think we've kind of morphed more into like a movie review show. Can you imagine it? I don't know. It's weird.
Well, I hope people like it. I mean, a few people tell me they do. We got some listeners. We got some Patreon supporters, and you can be the next Patreon supporter. So come on down to lastnight.com/Patreon. And Miguel, thanks again for being our guest. We'd love to have you back. Just let me know what tickles your fancy, and we'll get it on the calendar. And with that, we'll say good night from last night, everyone. All right, we're going to continue the transmission for just a few more minutes while Tina, the fat lard, eats the food. And I'm going to pose the question out here, Robert. This is related to, do the chickens have large talons?
Yes.
So as you are aware, and Miguel, as you are about to be aware, I got some chickens as a result of the breakdown in the food supply and supply chain. I thought I would be a little bit more self-reliant, so we got some chickens, and we got 10. And the other day, I made a mistake, and now we have 9. Now,
a steak or a mistake?
I made a mistake, not a chicken steak. I made a mistake. I made an error in judgment.
Make a chicken fried steak, by the way.
So I made an error in judgment, and here's the question. What... I hope the kids aren't awake right now. But what actually happened was that I was trying to get the chickens to go up into their the enclosed portion of their coop for the night, because they weren't yet familiar with it. It was still new to them, so they were all still outside on the ground floor of the coop. And the dog was out there with me, and she was like very excited about them and moving them around, like herding them, like a healer will do. They'll herd an animal. And so I was like, oh, this is great. I'll use that, her corralling them, and then I'll go in there and I'll move a few of them up into the upper portion and thus show them where they should reside in the evenings, because it's going to be warm in the upper portion of the thing. There's a little heater in there and all this, and it gets cold at night. The mistake that I made was going in there and not blocking the door like a goalie quite good enough. So a puck got by me, and then the dog got the puck, and the puck didn't survive. So here's the question to you, Robert. I told the girls that it was Dad's mistake, and one of the chickens didn't make it through the night. So is that a vague truth? And is that all they need to know? Or is it a lie of omission because I didn't tell them the details? And if I did tell them the details, my fear is that they would be angry at the dog and not at me, because it's not the dog's fault. It's in the dog's nature to do that. And I made the mistake that had the dog and the chickens in the same sector to where this could occur. What's your take?
Well, how good of a lawyer are your daughters at this point? Are they asking questions, like follow-up questions, or are they just taking your, hey, I made a mistake, and leave it at this vague kind of statement by their father? They're not going to ask for details?
Oh, that's an interesting point. Let's cram in some libertarianism in here, or at least some Austrian economics. A marginal utility scale. Apparently, because we had 10, and 9 from 10 is almost indistinguishable when you're looking at the coop. There's still a mass of chickens running around. The loss of 1 chicken, apparently not so big of a deal. They were surprisingly okay with it.
Now, is this a chicken that had a name yet?
They all have names, but they weren't. They haven't been around long enough to really get the personalities and the whole thing going on. The chicken was 6 weeks old.
Okay. And you've had them for 2 or 3?
We've had them. We've had them for 6 weeks, and I think we got them they were probably just a few days old. You get them when they're very, very little.
Okay. So you're wanting to know, I think you did a good thing. Well, first of all, let's see here. I think, and my initial impression is that you did a good thing to leave the anger and the hatred on you where it rightfully belongs, and not on the dog, who is essentially just following its nature. I can't really see any kind of improper action on you. Miguel, do you have a hot take here? Do you want to jump in?
Am I exploiting them?
I wouldn't say I have a hot take. This sounds like a perfectly reasonable way to have handled this situation. And maybe if your daughters had a lot of emotional stake in this chicken dying, then you would have had a duty to be honest with them about how it played out. Yet if they're kind of carefree about it, like, yeah, we had 10, now we have 9. It's no big deal. They already knew that these 10 chickens would not be living forever. That part of their purpose is, as I don't know, are you just eating the eggs, or are you also at some point eating these chickens?
The intention is just for the eggs, and then they'll be pets throughout the rest of their lives. I don't intend to shorten their lives any further than I already have.
Now, if your daughters do come up with some follow-up questions, are you prepared to tell them the whole truth, nothing but the truth? So help you God.
Well, since it's not a court of law, I think that I felt a little bit of, I'm not telling them everything, but I'm kind of okay not telling them everything. So in a way, it is sort of a lie of omission, but it is what they need to know and the amount of information that they need. And I don't want them to misplace their anger at the dog, who is really an innocent party in this, even though she's the one who actually did the murder.
Right. But would you tell the whole truth if they were to ask for it?
I suppose, but
because otherwise you got to concoct some weird lie, right?
Well, I told him again today, like, hey guys, I'm really sorry I made a mistake. I could have taken better care of that chicken.
That chicken trusted me. I let it down.
All right. Well, that's probably enough of this. So that's my weird question. And yes, the chicken did have large talons, and now it's a dead chicken.
Did you get paid like $1 an hour to do it?
Speaking of the economics of having chickens, I don't know how many they're going to lay in their useful life, but if you assume that it's like 1,000 eggs, like 3 years of production, it's like $1 an egg to buy all this stuff and have all the feed and everything. So it's actually rather expensive, but you can buy organic eggs from other people for like $5 a dozen.
Division of labor wins again.
Yeah. So maybe, at some point in the 3 years out, you actually do get over to that crossover point of where it's actually like a positive return. However, I'm not necessarily looking for the monetary gains from it. I'm looking for I can have eggs a year from now when other people might not be able to, if this shutdown continues much longer and really breaks down society. So that was the angle I was going for, was moving the availability of eggs into a longer time horizon than just grocery store trips.
Security is valuable. Thank you, Daniel. Thank you, Miguel. It's been an excellent show. Come on back another time. And we'll see you again next week, everybody.
All right. Well, thank you, guys. We'll see you on Instant Family next week. You can find the show notes and more at actuallanarchy.com/179. And Miguel, we'd love to have you back. It's been a lot of fun. We'll have Amagi Entrepreneurs down on the show notes page as well. And if you can stick around for a little bit longer, we'll do some bonus content for people right after our closing messages. Maximum freedom, everyone. Peace out.
The Chipmunks. CHIPMUNK. We're the Chipmunks. Guaranteed to brighten your day. Do 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 do.